Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. I am David Cass. I'm the Executive Director of Americans for Tax Fairness. So we are a coalition of more than 400 endorsing organizations around the country who are united in a simple belief that if we can build an economy that's affordable for everyone by making sure that rich people and big corporations pay their fair share of taxes. So Tax Day is a really important moment to evaluate our progress. So while workers pay income tax with every paycheck every 2 weeks, are the ultra wealthy and huge corporations doing the same? No, they're not. They can go years without paying little or nothing. And why? Because of 45 years of trickle-down tax cuts. They've never really trickled down to us. And then all the loopholes and special breaks that their army of lobbyists do. So when billionaires and corporations don't pay their fair share, is that good for us? No, it's not. Excellent answer. Everybody suffers. And there's not enough, the result is that there's not enough revenue to provide the kind of public investments that bring down costs for workers and families, things like health care and child care, education and housing. And also, when wealthy households and large corporations avoid taxes, it just makes them richer and more powerful. And so it destabilizes our economy and endangers our democracy. Taxing the rich is an important way of reclaiming the country for ordinary Americans. So there are solutions to this, though. And many of them are in the tax policy agenda that we released recently. It's called Tax the Rich and Make Life Affordable. So we call for $10 trillion in new revenue over 10 years from the wealthy and corporations. So it's just common sense reforms, things like making billionaires pay their fair share, raising corporate tax loopholes and curbing economic dynasties, and that $10 trillion can be used to invest in and support workers and families and even lower public debt. So throughout the day, we're meeting with members of Congress to share the agenda, and local organizations around the country are doing the same thing. So in a dozen states around the country. So today is truly a national call for higher and fairer taxes on the rich and corporations. So I am honored to be able to introduce our first speaker, who is a true champion of tax fairness. She is a lead co-sponsor of the Ultra Millionaire Tax Act and the great Congresswoman from the state of Washington, Congresswoman Jayapal.
All right, everybody, it is so good to be here with you all. I'm going to say the first word, you finish the second and the third. Tax!
The rich!
Tax!
The rich!
I really appreciate Americans for Tax Fairness, the Patriotic Millionaires, AFT, NWLC, and the Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice for keeping up this incredible drumbeat on what we need to do in our country. Look, I don't know about you, and I don't know if you saw I had a fiery exchange with Russ Vogt today in Budget Committee. I am sick and tired of a deeply broken tax system that gives giant tax breaks to the billionaires and sticks working and poor people with smaller paychecks and bigger bills. The richest of the rich are out there buying yachts and Rolexes, while low-income parents are working 2 and 3 jobs and still unable to afford rent or childcare or healthcare. It is an outrage that in the richest country in the world, the richest 1% of Americans own 50% of our country's wealth, and half of Americans combined, altogether, own just over 2% of the wealth. That's not an accident. That is actually a system by design, designed by the billionaires and the ultra-wealthy for the billionaires and the ultra-wealthy. They've got tax loopholes that are as big as the yachts they own, while working people are paying more and more on their earnings, even as wages don't keep up with inflation. And you know, when we beefed up the IRS under the Biden administration and changed the rules so that the IRS went after the wealthiest tax cheats instead of working people, the IRS brought in over $1.1 billion from just 1,600 wealthy tax cheats who were just evading their taxes. But of course, guess what happened to that program? Trump got rid of it, right? And then he passed trillions more in tax cuts for the wealthiest. Not to mention the outright corruption that we see from the White House as Trump profits off his power, bringing in more than $2 billion in personal grift just since he got back into office. Now, all of that is happening as we see our tax dollars wasted on an illegal, unauthorized war of choice in Iran, which has wasted as much already as $15 billion, $50 billion since it started. So it's a rigged system. And that's why we're all here, right, Senator Van Hollen? One that is built to favor those at the top and squeeze every last dime out of those at the bottom. And so that's exactly why Senator Elizabeth Warren and I have introduced the Ultra Millionaire Tax Act. It's a simple bill. Yeah, you should cheer for that. This is a good thing. It's a super simple bill. It says if your household has a net worth between $50 million and $1 billion, you pay just 2 cents on every dollar. So all of you who are worried because you have $50 billion or $49 million of wealth, you get your first $49 million free and clear. It's only when you get to 50 million that you pay 2 cents. And if you have a net worth over $1 billion, then you pay just 3 cents. Sounds pretty reasonable. And guess what? It only affects 0.15% of all the households in America. Well, that tiny tax on a tiny number of people brings in huge revenue, over $6.2 trillion over the next decade. And with that revenue, we could invest in real people. We could invest in childcare, in healthcare, in education, in transitioning to renewable energy, in affordable housing, the fundamental investments that help benefit working people and poor people so that they can thrive, not just barely survive. So taxing the rich so that they pay their fair share is not just the right thing to do, it allows us to actually invest in the majority of Americans and allows them to live decent lives. Across America and across party lines, Americans agree it is way past time for billionaires and the ultra wealthy to pay their fair share. And we had something super exciting happen in my home state of Washington, and so to talk about that, I am so happy to introduce one of the leading champions of reforming our regressive tax system in Washington State, my friend, the incredible State Senator Noel Frame.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Congresswoman Jayapal. It is such a privilege to be standing with you today alongside so many tax justice champions. I also want to shout out right out the gate my partners and co-conspirators from the State Innovation Exchange and the State Revenue Alliance who are standing right behind me, who work with me to co-organize 16 states of tax champions, which we're going to talk about a little bit today. Congresswoman, the work that you and your colleagues in Congress are doing is so critical to the well-being of my constituents, our constituents, and all of our constituents. For more than 10 years, I've had the privilege of representing the people of the 36th District of Washington State, that is a portion of the city of Seattle. And in that entire time, I have focused on advancing just tax policy, and I currently serve as the Vice Chair of Finance for our Senate Ways and Means Committee. As you just heard, our state has the distinction of having the second worst tax code in the entire country. And I do say the worst, the second worst, because it is disproportionately impacting our low-income and middle-class families with our tax code. In my state, our lowest income households pay 13.8% of their income in taxes, while our highest income households pay just 4.1%. Yeah, it's not right, it's not fair, it's not sustainable for the working people in my state. For nearly 100 years, we have not had an income tax in Washington state, and as a consequence, we have been forced to be overly reliant on sales taxes and other excise taxes that are deeply regressive. But just about 2 weeks ago, that all changed. Yeah. On March 30th, our governor signed into law our millionaire's tax, which is a 9.9% tax on households with annual income over $1 million. Thank you. This was a huge victory achieved after years of working with community members and partners. The millionaire tax in Washington state raises $3.5 billion per year. And that is allowing us to invest that money into public schools, healthcare access, higher education, funding for universal school meals, and thank you, and dedicated funding for early childhood education and childcare. At the same time, we're also reducing taxes for working families and small businesses within the same bill. We talk a lot about rebalancing our tax code in Washington. So we didn't just do the millionaire's tax on those incomes over $1 million. We also reduced taxes for working people. We expanded our working families tax credit. We expanded our small business tax credit, which is the biggest tax break for small business in our state's history. We exempted regular household items like diapers, shampoo and personal care products, and over-the-counter medication, and reduced other sales taxes. This is a huge deal. A huge win and a huge deal for the working people of Washington State. And I will tell you, the choice of how that revenue is being used is a direct response to the affordability crisis in our state and in this country. And as you just heard, it is no accident. The affordability crisis isn't an accident. It is a result of policy choices that have protected concentrated wealth over the prosperity of working people in policy that is deeply rooted in racism. With the passage of H.R. 1, which we like to call the one big billionaire tax break bill, the tariffs, the war, blatant corruption, the Trump administration has exacerbated this crisis, initiating the largest transfer of wealth from working families to the billionaire class in modern United States history. That is what we are responding to in Washington State. And we know that we in the states are proving that there is a different path forward. We are making progress because we know that progressive tax codes, those states that have them, that's where you have higher rankings for raising a family and having great places to live and work. And we are winning in the states. We are winning. In addition to our victories in Washington State, New Mexico just made it harder for corporations to hide their income in offshore tax havens, right? States across the country are rejecting the corporate tax breaks in Trump's tax bill, including places like Florida, Indiana, and Idaho. These places, despite Trump saying this is a loyalty test, whether or not you conform with my tax bill, they are rejecting that because, P.S., they have state budgets to balance as well. Tax breaks for the billionaire-backed data centers, they're on the chopping block too. Arizona's governor is their commission is putting weight behind that policy. And in Washington State, we just passed my bill to roll back part of our data center tax incentives. So it is happening. This is the result of years of work in partnership with community organizations and members of our community. And I will tell you, lawmakers like me and the ones right next to me up here, we are just staring in the eyes of billionaires and millionaires and saying enough. Enough of billionaires and millionaires hoarding wealth. Enough of billionaires and millionaires depriving our constituents and communities of the resources that they need to thrive. And enough of billionaires and millionaires, frankly, manipulating our democracy to enrich themselves at the expense of everyone else. We need to be fighting these fights here in Washington and state capitals across the country because ending wealth inequality, funding the care economy, protecting immigrants, the tax policy is a critical tool in the tool belt for economic justice and all those causes. I, for one, will keep fighting. We just passed a millionaire's tax, but there's still so much more work to do. I'll keep fighting every day for my constituents until extreme wealth and income equality is a relic of history. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. Yep.
Okay. Hello, everybody. It is tax day, which is a fitting time to come together as we are to say that we're going to end a tax system that is stacked in favor of the billionaires and the very rich and against working people. We're going to do that together. And I want to thank all of the organizations that have come together, including Americans for Tax Fairness, Patriotic Millionaires, AFT, and my good friend Congressman Jayapal mentioned some of the others, and I want to thank her for all of her leadership on these issues. Thank you, Congressman Jayapal. And thank you, State Senator Frame. Thank you for helping lead by example in Washington State. Look, we need a system that ends the super tax breaks for the wealthy and gives everybody else a fair shot. And we know everybody else is being squeezed right now. right? And people who are working paycheck to paycheck are experiencing higher and higher costs. We have a president who said he was going to focus on bringing down those costs. Of course, he also said he was going to end wars. And instead, he has started a war and is driving prices through the roof. They were already high because of his policies, including his across-the-board tariff policies. And now he's driving them up higher and higher. And this is the same president and same Republican Party who said that they were going to be there for working people. But when they passed what they called their big, beautiful bill, it was pretty clear it was beautiful for one group of people. It was really beautiful for billionaires and the very rich. Because at the same time, they cut Medicaid, they cut food and nutrition programs. And if you look at the tax benefits of that bill, about 50% of the tax benefits went to the top 5% income earners. And the other, and 75% went to the top 20%. They included some other things for working people, which is the ones that they focus on and want to talk about. And in my view, there's some good provisions there, but they do that to provide cover for their tax cuts for the very rich. And so I am really pleased to be here with all of you. As we say, it's not enough. It's simply not enough to say what we're against. Yes. The big betrayal of a bill was really bad for America. But it's not enough simply to say why. We do need to provide alternatives. And that's why I want to thank Washington State and your leadership for providing alternatives. And that's what we're here to talk about today. And there are a number of things that we need to do. One of the most rigged parts of our system is the fact that people who make money off of money get a much better deal than people who earn their paycheck through hard work. And as a result, people pass on huge fortunes, billions of dollars, without ever paying a tax. And it creates an American aristocracy much more than a democracy where everyone's supposed to get a chance. So I support the legislation put forward by Congressman Jayapal and Senator Warren. Also, Bernie Sanders has a wealth tax bill. There are a number of wealth tax bills. We definitely need to address that issue. But I'm also pleased to advance with Congressman Don Beyer, who we've jointly put together a bill for many years to essentially do what Washington State has done, which is a surtax on millionaires. And it's pretty simple. I think like your provision, it adds the surtax to the first dollar over $1 million a year. All right, first dollar over $1 million a year. We have a 10% surtax on that income. And that's an important measure to take for tax fairness. I also believe that we need to give working people who are working paycheck to paycheck a tax break, relief. And that's why I have introduced, again, with Don Beyer, the Working Americans Tax Cut Bill. And we've worked with all the organizations represented here. And the idea is pretty simple. If you're somebody who is just earning enough to meet your basic cost of living expenses, then you should get federal income tax relief. That is the fundamental idea behind that bill. And I want to thank AFT and the AFL-CIO, 19 of my colleagues in the Senate, Democratic colleagues, Move On, Indivisible, Americans for Tax Fairness, for getting behind that fundamental idea of tax fairness. And of course, we pay for it with the millionaire surtax. But I want to close with this. We should not have small ambitions. My view is that we can provide tax relief to hardworking Americans and generate incomes through a wealth tax and other measures, closing loopholes, in order to make sure that we extend the Affordable Care Act, in order to make sure that we address other fundamental issues, in order to make sure that under Medicare we do cover, finally, vision and dental and hearing. So there's a lot we can do as long as we don't ourselves narrow our ambitions. They didn't do that in Washington State. You didn't narrow your ambitions, and we shouldn't do that here in the United States Capitol. So thank all of you for being part of this, and let's get it done.
Yeah, so I'm Don Byer from Virginia. Happy Tax Day, everyone. Thank you all for being here, and I really want to especially thank my dear friend, Senator Van Hollen. He's a senator, so he doesn't have to wear a coat. Chris and I have worked together very well in a number of things, and thank you for all your leadership. And Congresswoman Jayapal, and Congressman DeLuzio, Senator Markey. I'm thrilled to be surrounded by colleagues who feel as deeply about this as do I. And measures like this couldn't be any more necessary than they are now, because this has never been a time under Trump's leadership to be a millionaire or a billionaire in America. And not so much, though, for the working class and the middle class. In both his terms, President Trump and congressional Republicans have tried their hardest to serve the only constituency they really care about, the ultra-rich. Yes. And they've succeeded. Yeah. And instead of focusing on lowering costs, providing significant tax relief for ordinary Americans, the big, ugly Trump bill, the big, ugly billionaires bill that Trump signed last year included billions of dollars in giveaways for the wealthy. And this skewed our already unfair tax code even more in favor of the rich. And it came at the cost of a $5 trillion deficit to our budget. By the way, the interest on that deficit overwhelmingly goes to the richest already. Just the deficit alone is a transfer from those least able to those most. Here are a few more numbers. 2027, the top folks in the top 0.1%, 1 in 1,000, can expect an average tax cut of $309,000. That's per person. Those making around $1 million, $100,000 cut, and those making under $50,000, a $247 cut. Whatever benefits the Republicans included for the working class were time-lapsed, time-limited, and capped. And this has led to an extremely disappointing tax season for most American families. And that economic boom that was promised, that hasn't happened either. In fact, almost everything Trump has done in this term has been hurting the economy. His moronic trade war that jacked up prices, slowed growth, and angered our allies. And on top of that, the global energy crisis that came from his war of choice with Iran. What all that adds up to is a much harder world for the working class. Groceries, job market, gas prices, and debt growing out of control. And while ordinary Americans struggle to afford basic necessities, they get to watch Trump's billionaires get ever richer, while their party gets to build a new ballroom, a new Mar-a-Lago golf club, and an arch across the river. Enough is enough. Our tax code should not be a vehicle for Republicans to reward their rich friends. Americans expect a fair deal, and the tax code should do that. A version of this measure, by the way, that Chris and I introduced today, already passed the House in the Build Back Better. So we know that there's almost 210 Democrats ready to vote for it. We just need a couple of Republicans. So thank you very much for being with us today. Let me now introduce a patriotic millionaire and a technology expert from Silicon Valley, Mr. Scott Ellis.
Thank you so much to all of our elected officials who are providing such leadership, and to the organizational partners. This is a critical fight, and we have to do it together. So thank you so much. As a member of the Patriotic Millionaires, I've seen examples of the good that wealth can do, but I've also seen all the ways it can lead to irreparable harm for our personal, political, moral, and societal well-being. And despite what you hear from some of our most visible billionaires like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Peter Thiel, there is a level of wealth beyond which it threatens the health and even the existence of our democracy and our economy. And right now, our current administration seems intent on allowing these kinds of people the ability to write the rules while insulating themselves from any semblance of accountability. We cannot hand over the keys of our democracy to people who are unwilling to address the economic injustices that exist today. I stand before you today not only as a wealthy person, but as a citizen of this country who is begging our elected officials to find a way to deal with the money problem in our country. Yeah. We've created a political economy that guarantees we will become more unequal more quickly over time, and we are already at historic levels of inequality, and every time inequality reaches extraordinary levels, we create vulnerability to authoritarianism, where money becomes power. And when power threatens your democracy, you have to limit power, and the only way to do that is through taxation. Right now, there are two bills in Congress that would do exactly that: the Working Americans Tax Cut and the Equal Tax Act. Working Americans Tax Cut create a federal tax exemption up to the cost of living for working class Americans and shift responsibility for the lost revenues to people like me, to the patriotic millionaires and other millionaires with incomes over $1 million annually. And the Equal Tax Act would treat all income equally. All money is money. It ensures that wealthy investors are not paying a lower tax rate on their income than working people who pay every day on money they earn through working rather than sitting around and gaining it through investing. We want to stop both authoritarianism and we want to eliminate the preconditions that lead to its rise. These bills would put us on a path to doing exactly that. We need to unrig our economy. We need a bold, surprisingly simple economic vision. Millionaires like me who want a rich, stable, free economy demand an economy and a country that ensures it. Help us get there by supporting these bills and by supporting these great leaders. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Representative Lucio.
Yep, thank you. All right. Thank you, and thanks Rep. Jayapal, Americans for Tax Fairness, Patriotic Millionaires. I've got a graphic. I'm going to hold it up. Okay. Anybody seen this before? Okay. You seen this meme? I think this summarizes pretty well the fairy tale trickle-down economics that the Republicans believe in. And they're laughing at everybody. They know it's never worked. They funneled money to the ultra-rich and the powerful at the expense of everybody else. It has been their economic ideology for a long time, and it's a bunch of crap. It doesn't work. It works, maybe, if you believe them, which the point of it is to funnel money up. That's what this has accomplished. Thank you, Zoe. Hang on to that. So look, we have a revenue problem in this country, we have a fiscal recklessness problem in this country, and a lot of it stems back to that, to this trickle-down economics fairy tale that has failed our government. It has saddled us all with debt. It has put power at the top at the expense of everybody who works hard in this country. You can think about Social Security taxes, and I know guys like Elon Musk, they stop paying taxes in on January 1st. That's the last day they will pay in towards Social Security. We have a revenue problem, a taxing obscene wealth problem in this country. And what is the Trump administration, what's their fiscal answer? They're looking to spend billions of dollars on this war while telling the country they have no money to fund the VA, to pay for health care, to cut public transit and rail safety. I could go on and on. That's their answer. The $200 billion they're going to ask the Congress to fund this war, we could pay for lunch for every kid in school in America with billions left over. It's the cost of child care for nearly every kid in America under 5. We could pay for high-speed rail. I could go on and on. There are choices in this. And the Republican plan, again, what's their plan? Jack up the debt that we will all pay for, slash people's health care, take a sledgehammer to the VA, funneling tax giveaways to the ultra-rich and powerful. That's it. That's their economic program. Oh, and all by the way, to funnel and put that money to pay for a reckless war we don't have to fight in Iran. That is their program. And so let's look at a very different idea for taxes. I'll point back to a radical lefty named Dwight Eisenhower, who when he was president, the top marginal tax rate in this country was north of 90%. We used to tax wealth in America. Today, that top tax rate is 37%. It is a choice. It's a choice that we disagree with. And so the proposals are pretty popular and they're good policy. And you've heard about a bunch of them. Rep. Jayapal's bill, Senator Van Hollen, and Representative Don Beyer. It's about taxing obscene wealth and taxing obscenely high income. It's not more complicated than that. And look, if you've got 3 commas in your net worth, I guarantee you can pay more in taxes. It is not a complicated thing, folks. Let's build an economy that works for everyone, where people earn their slice of the American dream, where they're not faced with a higher tax burden than people who make their money from their investments. That's what I believe. I think we can get this thing done. The American people are with us here. So thank you so much. Again, to Patriotic Millionaires, Rep. Jayapal, Americans for Tax Fairness. I'll bring up from Massachusetts, Senator Markey.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Chris, thank you so much to everyone who is here. So we're here to start the movement to tax the rich so that we have tax fairness and equity in our country. Right now, the rich are getting richer and everyone else is paying taxes. That's what today represents. This tax day, where the millionaires and billionaires, they continue to receive undeserved tax breaks, and Donald Trump simultaneously says that the federal government can't afford to pay for Medicare or Medicaid or for child care in our country. while they demand tax breaks for the Trump family, for the Witkoff family, for all of those already too rich families in our country. That is why we are here today, because we are angry at what Trump has perpetrated as a crime against the working class families in our country who fight too hard for their families every single day, only to see our government looted by the Trump family and their Republican MAGA allies. So we know that the problem is not crime on the streets. The problem is crime in the suites, the executive suites, the corporate suites, the suites of the rich, in every single part of our country. That is what has happened. And what do we have? We have the 25 richest Americans paying less than 5% if they pay any taxes at all. And that's because our tax code rewards wealth over work, giving special tax breaks to investors trading stocks over workers who punch clocks every single day. Those are the people who are building our country. And who does more for our country every single year? The 200,000 kindergarten teachers, or a small handful of hedge fund managers who actually made more money last year than all of those kindergarten teachers combined? Who contributed more to our country's greatness, to our future? Okay. Thank you, teachers. Thank you, AFT. Thank you for what the teachers do for us every single year. So that's why Congresswoman Delia Ramirez and I introduced the Equal Tax Act, the Tax the Rich Act, so that they are paying their fair share of the dues to run our country every single year. And our bill would tax wealth like work and close loopholes that let the ultra-wealthy avoid paying their taxes. The legislation is needed now more than ever. All of these bills that all of the members are introducing, they all are aimed at one goal: to make sure that the rich pay their fair share for all of the gifts that our country gave to them, so they can become the richest 1% in the history of the world. And yet they are ungrateful. If you kicked them in the heart, you would break your toe. So we thank the patriotic millionaires who are gathered here today. We have our cadre of millionaires, because they know that the small handful of millionaires and billionaires last year got more in tax giveaways than 127 million American households combined last year. And that's just plain wrong. The ultra 1% received $1 trillion alone. And so we just have to make sure that we stand up, that Americans are able to enjoy all of the fruits of our great society. They loot Medicaid by $1 trillion. They loot the Medicare by $500 billion. They loot the Affordable Care Act by $300 billion. They loot the Department of Education with the head of the World Wrestling Federation becoming the person who makes the decisions for kids with disabilities, kids with who need a little more help to be educated. And the message is always the same: we're going to loot that money and then cut back on the programs for the kids who need it the most. So that's what we're fighting for here. We're fighting for every kid on every porch across the country. My father drove a truck for the Hood Mill Company. His son is a United States Senator. I'm only here because of the programs that were in place. That's the only reason I made it. And so we're here to fight for every kid on every porch, every boy and every girl, so they get to realize their American dream, the way those billionaires did. But we can't allow them to loot that dream, because that's what they're doing. That's what we're here today to fight for: taxing the rich. Thank you all so much for everything that you are doing. Now I give you Emily Martin.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Senator Markey. Thank you, Congresswoman Jayapal, Senator Van Hollen, Congressman DeLuzio, Congressman Beyer, State Senator Frame, for all of your steadfast leadership.
My name is Emily Martin, and I'm proud to serve as the Chief Program Officer at the National Women's Law Center, where we work for gender justice in the courts, in Congress, and in our communities. And I'm here today with one message. Tax justice is gender justice. When this administration kicks 2.5 million people off food assistance to pay for billionaire tax cuts, and women make up more than 60% of adults on SNAP, we need gender justice. When this administration slashes Medicaid, defunds Planned Parenthood, and doubles ACA premiums to pay for billionaire tax cuts, eviscerating all these programs where women make up the majority of those served, we need gender justice. And when this administration slashes student loan relief programs, when women take on the majority of student loan debt, we need gender justice. They claim that their tax cuts help everyday women and families, but we know the truth. We know they are robbing us, cutting vital programs to put more dollars in the pockets of the rich. Right now, across the country, women can't afford groceries, health care, college, child care, and costs are spiking. Women are still poorer than men, and that's especially bad news in 2026 because this administration is hell-bent on making life harder for everyone who struggles. In fact, instead of doing something to actually help women and families make ends meet, they're eyeing even more cuts to programs to pay for even more tax cuts for the wealthy few. They are robbing us. Donald Trump says it's simply not possible to fund Medicare, Medicaid, and child care because instead he wants to spend our money on wars, ballrooms, brutality against immigrants, and billionaire tax breaks. Americans deserve better than leaders who prioritize billionaires over everyone. We deserve leaders who understand that the entire purpose of government is to make ordinary people's lives better. We deserve a government that makes the wealthy pay their fair share, that expands refundable tax credits for low-income women and families, and that invests in child care and care for aging and disabled family members and health care and education. So I want to thank the incredible leaders here today who are fighting for our families, for our communities, and for our democracy. Thank you for reminding us every day that poverty is a policy choice, and we can make different choices. And I also want the Trump administration to know we're not going anywhere. We're never going to stop fighting for women and their families. You are robbing us, but justice is coming. So now it's my honor to hand it over to a true partner in that fight, Secretary-Treasurer of AFT, Frederick Ingram.
Got it, no problem. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Frederick Ingram. I am a high school band director serving as the Secretary-Treasurer of the American Federation of Teachers. We represent 1.8 million teachers and healthcare workers and public service workers all across this country. And we simply came by to add our voice to Americans for Tax Fairness. We believe that our members, the people who we represent, the lifesavers every day, those hardworking kindergarten teachers that were talked about earlier, those middle school teachers who are creating magic in our classrooms, those high school teachers who are giving it everything that they have, they ought to be able to, on tax day, put happy and tax day in the same sentence. And they cannot because they're paying their fair share. They do what we ask them to do. They know what's at stake. They believe in this country because they give it back to each community every day. We're simply asking our millionaires and billionaires to take some of what you have and give it to the rest of society simply because it's fair, simply because it's right, simply because it's just and it's equal. That's what we teach in our schools, and that's what we should be doing in the halls of justice here in Congress. So we came by again. The AFT is adding their big voice to something that is so important and so vital to making America better. We can be better than this. We know that we are. I want to thank all the politicians. I want to thank all of the constituent groups and all of the advocacy groups. AFT stands with you 100%. Tax to the rich, and we will make this country better. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. I am the final speaker. Fear not. I am Lori Carafone. I'm the Executive Director for Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice, and we are here with all of our friends, including Americans for Tax Fairness, to call on Congress with a moral call. Raise $10 trillion over the next decade by taxing the ultra-wealthy and corporations so that they pay their fair share. This will put our country on track towards a positive future that makes life more affordable for all of our communities, all of our workers, all of our families who are feeling the impacts right now of severe program cuts and an economy that simply does not work for them. As Catholics and people of faith and goodwill, we believe that our country's resources must be shared for the benefit of everyone, not hoarded by an ultra-wealthy few. And right now, as you've heard, many families cannot afford food, healthcare, a home, childcare, but yet we all are paying our taxes. Yet our current tax code allows the ultra-wealthy to immorally hoard money and avoid paying their taxes so that the rich get richer. Pope Leo the 14th speaks of the growth of a wealthy elite, living in a bubble of comfort and luxury, almost in another world compared to ordinary people. Trump's budget offered big tax cuts to the wealthiest while slashing food and Medicaid services from the communities that are most in need. This is wrong. This is evil. And now Congress wants to do even worse. Instead, when everyone pays what they owe, when everyone pays what they can, we can deliver healthcare and childcare and education and end hunger and end the housing crisis. We can preserve Social Security for future generations and so much more for the common good. The Catholic Church affirms that governments have a responsibility to fairly tax those with excessive wealth, to distribute it more equally for all of us, for the common good. And we are here, all of us today, to call for an economy for all, united in our commitment to building a moral economy with a just and moral budget that works for everyone, not just a few.
Is anybody ready to fight? Is anybody ready to tax the rich? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Is anybody ready to tax the rich? All right, let's go do it. Thank you, everybody. All right.